Well, we should be live, and I think we are.
Excellent.
Should be live, and I think we are. What?
Alive and kicking.
We
Very
should be
good.
live.
On another day in an unprecedented international trade war, uh, which no country but one started, no country but one wants, but every country, including the one that started it, is heavily involved. And as you know very well, the government of Canada under Prime Minister Carney has made a number of fundamental policy changes for the international trade perspective in Canada, the most important of which is what seems to me to be a firm pledge to end interprovincial trade barriers, which have bedeviled Canadian national market, the creation of the Canadian national market since day one. And it's all understandable, given the division of powers and all that, we understand that, but it makes absolutely no sense as a platform for an internationally focused economy. So I think we've got to give Carney, the Prime Minister rather, all the credit in the world for being the very first Prime Minister of Canada to publicly commit to creating a national economy.
So, John, by the way, our first show was very well received. And I know you've talked to numerous folks around speakers, which we are looking forward to getting.
Mm.
And I do know that you wanted to talk about a very specific topic, which you've now introduced, and that being trade diversification.
Yeah, obviously, with such a huge percentage of our bilateral trade being with the United States, there is a need to diversify, but not entirely, because many of the products about a third of our exports to the United States are inputs to American businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And a significant proportion of those, for a significant proportion of them, there is no substitute. And in dollar terms, the exports of oil to the United States are large, and the United States must import the oil from Canada because it would cost them, I think, $1 billion a refinery to convert away from the Canadian feedstock and take 3 years to do so. The same is true with uranium from Saskatchewan, the world's largest and richest uranium mines. The rich in terms of they're 100 times richer than uranium mines anywhere else on Earth. Anywhere else, in a uranium mine, you get 5 pounds of uranium per ton of ore. In Saskatchewan, you get 400 to 500 pounds. So that generates about 20% of the electricity in the United States. There's no other source. And the same is true for potash. Saskatchewan is the world's largest reserves of potash, and potash is the crack cocaine of the agriculture industry. It's the best fertilizer we know. All I'm saying is that we're going to diversify trade away from the United States, except for those products upon which they depend.
And they can't create in their own country.
They cannot.
End of story.
And right now we're at a stage where there are large tariffs on aluminum. Well, the skins of every Boeing aircraft are made of aluminum from Canada. Aluminum is a metal, but it really is electricity. And the refineries, the aluminum industry, and largely in Quebec, is there because they've got cheap electric power. Anyway, that's just one part of the equation.
What I find intriguing with this is that do we really have a sense of the impact of this war on our country? I don't think we do from base, but like if so much is going to the States, you said almost a third of what we export to the US, they can't duplicate.
Not without great difficulty. That's right.
So that's 2/3 is left.
Approximately.
Okay. would be something they could duplicate that we would then need to we would need to find somebody else to buy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the point I want to make is that we're about to see, I'm certain, significant efforts by all governments, the federal and all the provincial governments and trade associations and industry leaders, to lead a diversification charge. Not that we haven't done it in the past. And you'll be well aware that, from the time of the 80s, we've been negotiating free trade agreements with a wide variety of countries, and we're very good at it. We are awaiting, I think, at this stage, all the nations in Europe to ratify CETA, which hopefully will happen and may be spurred on by this trade war.
Yeah.
We've been very good at that.
In the last several months, I have seen something come out of negotiations with Mexico and Canada and Europe. Trade deals. Are these real? Like, what are they? Are they real?
Are we talking about the ones that Washington is writing press releases, or the reality of other deals?
The reality of these attempts at trade diversification by the Canadian government with Mexico and Europe. Are they real?
Here's the point I want to make, actually.
Yes.
Is that governments cannot diversify trade because governments don't trade. We can and we will successfully diversify our trading patterns through the work of entrepreneurs and businesses and workers and the genius of the technologies we offer and the competitiveness of the products we offer. Only customers will diversify our trade. I mean, that doesn't take away, of course, from the need for free trade agreements and a policy framework which is conducive to this. Absolutely.
Okay, hold on. Let me back up a bit. I want to dig into this a bit more. So our government talks to the Mexican government.
Yeah.
On CBC News, out comes trade deal negotiated. What actually has been negotiated? In simple terms, has it been favorable commerce criteria so that it's easier for a company in Vancouver to send their stuff to Mexico than it is to send it to Seattle? Is that actually kind of the premise here?
Well, loosely. However, that it will. You put your finger on an interesting point. It will be very difficult for most Canadian companies to duplicate the favorable terms they have enjoyed until now in the United States. And I mean favorable in terms of it's close,
Yeah.
similar language, laws,
Yes.
similar consumer tastes. That is going to be very difficult. But given the fact that the United States is no longer quite as easy a place to do business, and
Right.
tariffs are changing the terms of trade, then other more challenging markets will become more attractive. And in terms of negotiations with another country, what we're really trying to achieve is as close to tariff-free entry for Canadian products as we can, and also all the product standards, the certifications and whatnot, so that the trade becomes easier. My second posting was in San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's my only American posting, right? Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Lots of Canadian companies doing business there. Our advice to them was once you've done your deal with your American customer, make your product as trouble-free for him as if he was importing it from New York City. In other words, use sea land, use sea train, ship it, duty paid, because the American importer won't necessarily put up with a more cumbersome set of trade terms. In a way, that's what we're seeking when we do free trade agreements around the world. But I want to go back to this point that the success of a trade agreement is step one is the agreement. But the true measure of success is the increase of trade opportunities. In fact, the creation of new customer bases for Canadian products and Canadian companies. And in return, of course, the same would be true for Mexican companies here. I mean, one of the people that will come on to this discussion is currently in Mexico. He's a Mexican-Canadian economist, Juan Navarro, and he has apart from being an economist and a university professor, he's got a business where he brings Mexican business people to Canada to encourage them to do business here. We know that there's a lot of reciprocal interest, let's put it that way, and in the current environment, every country is having to look away from the United States in ways they never really wanted to.
Okay, John. I get the essence of what you're saying. Okay, that it's governments don't do commerce with each other. Companies do commerce with each other. Therefore,
yeah.
What must be the favorable circumstances for that to succeed? Okay.
Yeah.
So great. We say we're going to do business with Australia. And I go, what? What does that even mean? Tell me.
Okay. It is partly, it is the terms of trade. We've had trade agreements with Australia, for example, for a very long time. But interestingly, the first Canadian government trade commissioner was posted to Sydney, Australia in 1894. What was his job? His job was to analyze what it was. This is 1894. Analyze what Australia was importing, assist Canadian companies who came to Australia to do business, send to Ottawa, it was in those days to Ottawa, the names and addresses of Australian companies that wanted to do business with Canada. John, that's when it took 6 weeks for a letter to go from Canada to Australia. Well, I want to say in this trade diversification, absolutely essential initiative, the truth is that the Trade Commissioner Service is the oldest government-funded trade service in the world. And today they have almost 1,000 trade experts spread around the world. I think 100, this number might be slightly off, but about 154 posts. Now, what does that mean for a company in, let's say, Victoria whose US market is crumbling and they do want to diversify trade? They've got to do some homework. But if they identify where additional customer bases may be that they've never dealt with before, they go to the trade commissioner, lay out exactly what they're looking for, look at what kind of a typical customer they're looking for. And those experts, for the time they're working for that company, they're not employees, but it's a confidential relationship. What that trade officer does for a Victoria company doesn't go on a website. They will do their level best to acquire, stimulate if it has to be, but acquire the names and addresses and bona fides of, let's say, Australian importers of that product. They'll look at the competitive situation. Who else is in that market? And they will be very clear on the terms of trade. So in this circumstance, in my view, and I spent 32 years as a trade commissioner, as you know, in my view, this is the moment. There have been others, but this is the moment for the relationship between Canadian businesses and their offices abroad to become very close.
Yes. And I might add, which we're contributing to, the
Yes.
education and knowledge of a Canadian business that wants to diversify.
Absolutely. And we will, in the next couple of weeks, spend a few minutes with Carolyn Tompkins, who is the president and CEO of the Forum for International Trade Training, which delivers practitioner-level trade training across the country through colleges and universities.
What a great.
And it is the world's best body of knowledge for practitioners.
Okay. Well, look, it's getting near dinner time.
It is, yes. Yeah.
I think this is very valuable. All right. And we will continue to we will continue to educate and provide knowledge for Canadian businesses to diversify their trade relationships away from the US because they have to, except for those industries in which the US can't duplicate. Now that's where we got to hope Trump is not sophisticated enough and tries to take over our country to get those key resources under his belt.
John, I have to tell you, you and I have known each other for a very long time. We never, in our wildest imagination, would have uttered the words that you just uttered.
Right? I know.
Never.
I know.
And just so we're clear, there was a feature in the Globe and Mail about 6 weeks ago focusing on an Iowa farmer. Now, that Iowa farmer buys $200,000 US worth of potash at the beginning of his planting cycle, and at the end, he buys another $200,000 worth of potash. Only one source, Saskatchewan. And guess who was the first senior Republican senator to go to President Trump and ask for a carve-out? Chuck Grassley, senior senator from Iowa, because it became immediately apparent that a critical input, which we're delighted to supply. I mean, securely, we are, no problem.
Yeah.
I think the tariff on potash going into the United States now is 10%, but that's 10% to the bottom line of, this is the Midwest of the United States. This is the prairies of the United States. This is the heart of their farmland. They feed not just the United States. That's one of the breadbaskets of the world. Anyway, you can see the kind of pressures that are going to build. Meanwhile, when I was in Japan, there was a Canadian working for McCann Erickson Hakuhodo, and in the advertising business, and we got to know each other pretty well. And he said, John, you got to understand that this was in the 90s. At that time, Coca-Cola was the most recognized brand in the world. Canada was number 2. And he said, if the Canadian government ever gave an advertising contract to a major advertiser, they would be licking their chops. Easiest sell possible. Where Trump has it wrong about international trade is, we only succeed, as you know, in any business, your own business. We only succeed when we create value for customers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't succeed when we exploit. That's short term. And we shop the world. As Canadian consumers, we expect to have, except now the United States, a range of choice. And in a free trade environment, what has happened in the last 50 years is more poverty has been eliminated in the globe than any other time in history. Anyway, the future is cloudy, but the world is still round. And we're going to lots of customers out there that we can serve, and lots of markets we can serve, and
we're going to help businesses with how they can serve those customers.
Absolutely.
John, thank you. Until we meet again, which will be soon. Take care, my friend.
Take care. All the best.